Good morning and welcome to the Personal Branding Seminar presented by Gary Jackson. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, on the lands on which we meet today across Australia. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Today, you're going to listen to a personal branding seminar from somebody who's very well versed in how to market yourself and how to progress your career. If you wish to ask a question to Gary Jackson today, just hit the Ask a Question button in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, type something up, hit send, and we'll take care of the rest with a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. I'd like to now introduce our presenter for today, Gary Jackson, currently the Vice President for Asia Pacific and Japan of Tenable. Gary Jackson has been with Tenable since the beginning of 2015 as Vice President of the Asia Pacific Japan region to build Tenable operations across Asia. He joined Tenable while based in Kuala Lumpur and has since relocated back to Australia after 20 years of living in Asia. Gary has extensive operational experience in IT and has acquired very strong awareness and respect of diverse Asian cultures. He has held vice presidential roles for Asia in Asia for over 20 years. His prior key roles were Vice President of Aruba Incorporated, now owned by HP, Vice President of Force 10 Networks, now based in Kuala Lumpur, and Vice President for the Asia Pacific for EMC, bought by Dell, but based in Shanghai and Hong Kong. I'd now like to welcome our presenter for today, Gary Jackson. Thank you. Gary, I think you're on mute.
Let's try that again. I love this, the difference between this and Zoom. It's so much fun. Okay, here we go again. Okay, so I've just got a few slides I want to go over in terms of career building, leadership, and why I wear a lot of weird clothes. So I'm going to give a very quick personal summary. You've done most of that already, Shreyu, just so I sort of level set a little bit. Then building a personal brand, does selecting companies matter in terms of building your career? Dumbing down of leadership, which is a sort of a personal beef of mine, the digital world, and a little bit maybe about public companies. So I grew up in West Footscray, or Altona, which is the very working class Melbourne suburbs, very, very working class actually. And my folks were typical hard-working people from the West. For those of you who are Melbourne-based, you would know that. Footscray, Altona is a little bit like Lower Redfern on a good day, I think, to sort of put it into context. I've always been very competitive. I graduated Melbourne Uni, electronics and maths. I always had a very strong personal determination to be the best at pretty much anything, whether it was sports or schoolwork. And those are the sports I really loved, including the infuriating game of golf, which I've never really managed to master. My entire career has been in IT, and I've worked for some pretty substantial companies, running Asia Pacific for most of them, with the exception of DEC, which was a long time ago. And I'm sure no one really knows who DEC is unless you've been around for a long while. That stands for Digital Equipment Corporation, by the way. Lived in Asia for 20 years, as said, and I've lived in basically 5 countries, including Australia, and returned to Australia in 2016. So building a personal brand. Brands are a reality in life, whether you think about it or not. Just like companies, people do have brands. Some of them may be completely unnoticeable, but they're still brands based on who you are, how you act, and what you do. My mentor, Lionel, he had a big personal brand. He was very entrepreneurial. He was an incredible risk taker. had a big influence on me. Obviously, had a terrific sense of humour, was tough as all hell and very unpredictable at times. But to him, you know, the customer was everything. He had this great mantra of don't let any phone ring more than 3 times, whether it's your phone or somebody else's. That's in the days when there were phones on desks, by the way, not mobiles. Everyone really does have a brand. It's just that, and so do products. You will recognise a lot of product brands. Some you'll recognise as good brands, some you'll recognise as not good brands, and some you'll say, what the hell is that product? But it's still a brand, it's just not a recognisable brand. I believe very strongly in personal brand building for building a career. I think all of us care about our career, no matter what our age is. And obviously when you're at uni and about to exit uni, the whole idea of where do I go, what do I do, how do I represent myself, it's a huge issue that faces everybody once they walk out of the cloistered, wonderful 4, 5 years, 6 years of university. Where to from here? And personal brand building has a big impact, whether you've thought about it or not. And brands regularly have some kind of tagline. Things go better with Coke. Mine was a pretty simple one, personally. Don't ever settle. Find the right hill to climb and go climb it. And sometimes you will get thrown off that hill during your career for a whole variety of reasons, and it's painful. It's likely to happen to most people once in their life, in their career, unless they stay under the radar for all of their life, and that's fine. That's an unrecognisable brand. That's what that is, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that in terms of building a career, it gets a lot harder if you don't have a brand that's somehow recognisable. There are obviously good brands, there's bad brands, you can see those. Same for companies. There's some great company brands and there's some very, very bad company brands. Again, based on their actions. Same applies personally. My personal brand is still don't settle. I believe in being able to take smart risks, which means using your brain and making some wise choices about, but being prepared to take a risk. Get noticed. I didn't go out of my way to get noticed, although probably in later years I did. And having some kind of prop or something that you do that's very connected to you is a great thing if you really want to have a noticeable, recognisable brand that can help you in building your career. And above everything else, whatever you do, you really do have to earn respect. That's not a right. Doesn't matter what your title is, you have to earn respect. So what's a prop? I very early on felt that there was I observed a couple of things and I thought, you know what, having some kind of recognisable difference that you can back up with performance is actually a good idea. You can see some of those props. I went to, Lady Gaga is probably the most interesting one for me. Initially, I thought she was a bit of a wacko, which is strange coming from me because I wear outrageous gear as well. And I actually had the privilege of going to her concert live in Las Vegas, and she is just an unbelievable performer with an immense amount of talent. So yeah, she's got a prop of outrageous dress and outrageous statements sometimes, but boy, does she back it up with who she is and how she performs as a performer. So they all have talent to back up this recognisable brand. Getting noticed is easier if you've got some kind of difference, but you sure as heck get remembered more, and that can be a good or a bad thing based on how you are protecting your personal brand by your own performance, what you say, what you do, and the consistency of those two. We've got a really smart techie in India at the moment, Himanshu. He has this massive, I think he's 28 years of age. He's got this great twirly moustache that he's very proud of. And I highlighted that to him. I said, Himanshu, that's a really cool moustache. You need to, so that's a brand and that's a prop. You need to always keep in mind that people are going to remember you more than somebody else. but hopefully they remember you for the good things, not the bad things. Not, I hope I don't see that guy with a twirly moustache again, or that guy was pretty darn impressive. Apart from his moustache, he was actually pretty darn good. So happy to work with him again. So your prop definitely raises the awareness. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Melbourne, so Aussie rules was obviously a very big part of my life personally. And it's interesting, again, back from 1968 to 1972, there was an AFL footballer, or VFL it was then, called Jeff Blethen, who was a very good footballer. Wasn't a brilliant footballer, but a very good footballer. And if you look up AFL.com website and you look up Jeff Blethen, it says slimly built, agile, and most memorably of all, bespectacled, which has nothing to do with his performance. And why? Because Jeff was the first person at the AFL level to wear glasses on field. So there's 36 people on the field, one of them wears glasses. Every time that person goes anywhere near the football, he's going to be noticed more than if he didn't, and going to be remembered more. And it's interesting, I played a lot of Aussie rules, obviously, and particularly as a teenager. At 15 years of age, I had to wear glasses for long sight. I wondered why I couldn't see things properly, and you don't realise your vision is not as good as everybody else's. You just think you're the same as everyone else. So, and it was very interesting. Once I started, and I had to get a special pair of glasses that had sort of a rubberized frame, because you didn't have all of the great options you do these days. So it was a rubberized frame and still mainly glass lenses, which was always a little bit of a risk. Jeff Blethen had the same situation. And the first year that when I was 16 years of age, I got a lot more votes. I didn't think my football had dramatically changed from the year before. But again, I was the only person out of 36 wearing glasses. That's a prop. I didn't choose it to be a prop. Thought about that as I went on in my career. So my get noticed was, I started off wearing very outrageous ties. You know, there'd be Mickey Mouse ties, or there'd be Donald Duck ties, and going to business meetings with it. And you are running a risk when you do that. You go, because the natural reaction from people is, who is this idiot with a Donald Duck tie on? Or who is this idiot wearing this crazy shirt or these vests? I used to wear very, very colourful vests or jackets, which you can see I still continue to do. I definitely would get remembered, and hopefully I was backing it up with what I said and how I represented myself. So it was a deliberate plan to get noticed, but you really have to set the bar very high personally if you're going to do that. And I believe if you want to build a career, you want to get noticed more than somebody else, so that you can build your career and obviously get to some of the places you would ideally like to get to. I never regarded myself as ambitious. I regarded myself as damn determined to be better than the rest as much as I could be and get noticed, and therefore get some offers. And that's kind of how things worked. Recently, Bill Gates did a kind of a controversial, interesting thing to get noticed. I mean, he's already noticed, but this is getting noticed in terms of a presentation, getting people to listen to what you want us to tell them, right? You don't get long to wow people, if you will. So we walked on stage on TED Talk, which is obviously a very technical group, with that bottle, and in the bottle was mosquitoes. And he said, and he opened the top and he said, "Why should only poor people get malaria?" Now that was a very controversial thing to do, which not everybody appreciated, but I can assure you, people were sure as heck listening to Bill Gates on the other side of that. That's what he walked on stage and did before he really said anything about his topic. He's going to get listened to because he's Bill Gates, but he sure as hell got listened to because of that action. So again, it's not just getting recognised, it's getting people's attention as soon as you can by doing something that demonstrates you've got a brain in your head, and you're going to back it up with your performance. Does it matter what companies you go work for? It sure as hell does. if building a successful career, people do look at resumes, and I get staggered by some of the resumes that I get to see. And of course, by the time you've been in the industry as long as I have and been in leadership roles for like 35 years, obviously I see a lot of resumes. And I just cannot understand why some people choose, unless they're in a desperate situation financially, which I understand. Sometimes you have to take a job because the company you're with closed down, or the company let you go, or whatever happened. You've got to desperately find another job because you've got mortgages, etc. Welcome to adult life with mortgages. But I still, other than those desperate reasons, why did that person, who seems like a fairly capable person, ever choose to go to that kind of a company? That company has a bad reputation. That company has no reputation at all, which is even worse. And they've spent 5, 6, 7, 8 years at a company that really has no great presence. So you have to think very carefully about what your next step is. What's the logic? What's the analysis? What thinking have you gone through for the next step? And I get some horrible explanations as to why, because I always ask, so tell me, why did you choose to leave IBM or whatever it was? And why did you choose to join Cisco or whoever it was? And some of the explanations are just shows that person hasn't really thought about a career, is just kind of bumbling along and looking for things to join without any real reason as to why I want to take the next logical step. I made quite strong logical choices about why I would go from a Microsoft to a Cisco, or from a Cisco to an EMC, or why am I in the software company that I'm currently in? Why was I interested really in security? Absolutely, I was, etc. So there were very conscious reasons why, when I was made an offer to go to something, I would say, yes, I'm interested, or no, I'm not, or sorry, I'm very happy where I am. They're all options you can take. The tenure where you are and the reasons for change are a big part of your brand build. And choices absolutely matter in building a brand. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is more of my beef about these days you can't say anything. So like you used to be able to, you can be less controversial. You don't set out to be controversial, but you set out to strongly let people see what you think and why you think that. And sometimes that's controversial. I used to be on CNBC every quarter when I was running Asia Pacific for Cisco. And no one gave me, this is what you can say and this is what you can't say. They had a measure of trust in my ability to, answer questions intelligently and not put Cisco in a stupid, difficult situation because of some ridiculous comment I would make. I'd earned the right. They trusted that the guy running Asia Pacific was going to say the right things and represent the company well. These days, there's no way I would be allowed on if I was still at Cisco, unless they gave me 27 things I could say and could not say. So running organisations and having leadership roles is much harder to get noticed, because we very rarely have anything particularly provocative to say, because the lawyers and the HR departments have given us this, what you can and can't do. And I actually have some sympathy for those of you that are in this starting up phase. I don't know, getting noticed, building a personal brand is not easy, especially when we're in this digital world where there's social media up the yin yang, some of which is good social media and some of which is not. Thank you guys for explaining Reddit to me. I will now look up Reddit. There's just so much. By the way, I am consciously not on Facebook. I am on Twitter. I chose not to be on Facebook about 2 or 3 years ago for two main reasons. One, I wasn't comfortable with the potential exposures personally. That's just a personal opinion. But more importantly, I got sick and tired of reading all of these ridiculously boring things about how one of my so-called friends decided to post that they'd gone for a walk along the beach this morning and it was a lovely day. That's nice, but that doesn't do it for me. But I know Facebook remains a really important social media. Again, the choices you make in social media, what you say, what you respond to, you have to keep in mind that they are all parts of a brand, and you need to think about, if I'm going to say this, if I'm going to respond to this, that's part of a brand build, whether you like to think of it that way or not. And hopefully it's a constructive brand build. So I think there's a lot of restrictions. I think it's hard to get noticed maybe as much as you used to be able to. You could certainly be more provocative. And then, of course, there was no digital social media world then, so it relied more on what the journalists were saying about you or what the journalists were saying about the company. I'm certainly glad I'm at the back end of a brand build. I think it was easier to be provocative and controversial. So, do you really need a memorable personal brand? No, you don't have to have it. It's not mandatory for life, but you're going to get one anyway. So if your brand is not memorable, it's a who is that person brand, and that's very much like companies, right? If you say, have you ever heard of Coca-Cola? Well, of course I have, right? That's actually not a company. That's a product brand, but have you ever heard of Microsoft? Well, of course I have. And then you can ask a question, have you ever heard of hundreds of companies? And you say, no, what do they do? So their brand, either because they're small or because they're not as recognizable, that's still a brand. It's a who is that? And that's okay. The majority of people will have a who is that person, unless I know them personally. You don't know anything about them, which of course what resumes sometimes are about, to help you to get to know that brand. I regard a resume, that's why I think what you put in a resume is really important, and the choices you make, because that, to me, if I don't know who you are, that's your representation to me of your personal brand, and it needs to make sense to me. You're going to get tagged in adult life. Growing up, we get it. He's mischievous, she's serious, he's fun, she's a bookworm, etc., etc. They're all kind of interesting adjectives as we grow up. They have a lot more import when you're in the working environment. The adult life tags have a big impact on careers. He's unreliable, she's not really a team player. These things hang around, and they're all part of what you say and what you do. That's how you get those brands. That's how you get those tags. And I think I want to be seen as setting high standards. I want to be seen as a great hire. I don't want to be seen as middle of the road or not a team player. The market perception of you is 80% driven by you. The rest is kind of, yeah, we can be lucky, right place, right time, absolutely. A little bit of luck, somebody in a role that you're potentially capable for has a medical problem or decides to leave. So sometimes, yep, it's right place, right time. But the majority of it is, we think we should offer that person the next role because that person is a really, really good employee. That person is really good at what they do. That personal brand has been built to a point of being noticed. People will talk about you and your brand when you're not in the room. Now they may say, never heard of him or her. That's one option. But if they say, yeah, I've worked with him or her before, and they don't really work all that hard, or they're not really a team player. You get all of these things that people will talk about you, and that's absolutely driven by your own personal actions. So my view has always been, I want to keep my personal bar high. I won't settle for just average. I want to be the best version of me as much as I can on a daily basis, and then you wind up with a brand that matters and is recognisable. That's my little chat.
Perfect. Okay, well, we've got a few questions that have come in that might be of interest. So the first question we've got for today, which people do you think and do you see have the best personal branding?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'm going to restrict it to my industry, right? Because I think, I could give you my opinions on public people, and that'd be a fun discussion right there, I'm sure. As it relates to the IT industry, well, obviously, recognisable brands has a lot to do with their careers. So, who are the great recognisable brands in IT? Bill Gates, who I have worked for, John Chambers, probably to a lesser extent, unless you're in the IT industry. John ran Cisco for 20 years. Cisco is an enormously successful company. Probably Bill Gates is maybe the most recognisable brand. He is a brilliant guy. I mean, he's not a warm character per se, but he in making presentations to Bill, he was always very focused on what's the best business decision in this situation. He never made it personal, and so that's something where I think you need to respect. He was not a warm character. You're very unlikely to go out and have a beer with Bill. I did do that a couple of times, but in a group. But the point is, that wasn't really a big important thing to him. So I think he has a very great reputation in the industry, even though some people don't regard him as warm. Larry Ellison, for those who know IT at all, who has been running Oracle for many years, has a much more controversial reputation. Again, a super smart guy. I also actually interviewed with Larry in his house in 1992. So the choice was then, this is about being recognised. So the choice for me was to run Microsoft or to run Oracle in Asia Pacific. So I had to interview with Bill Gates and Larry Ellison separately over in the US. He's much more arrogant. He's cocky. He's incredibly clever. He's run a brilliant company for many years. I would say his reputation is much more debatable and harder to have the same level of respect as you would for, say, Bill. But the fact is, he's run a brilliant company. I would put Bill Gates right up there. For me, John Chambers is the best leader I ever worked for. If you're not in the IT industry, you may or may not know Cisco, although I would hope Cisco is a brand by now. Is fairly pervasive in the world. I mean, it is in excess of $50 billion in revenue. And he's the greatest, the best leader, the best personal one-on-one or one-on-many that I had the privilege of working for and observing. You can go through the CEOs of a lot of the IT companies, and those that have lasted are very, very few. And I think Gates, Chambers and Ellison would be the three that I would put right up there for different reasons.
Talking about, I guess, sort of personal brands, moving on that topic a little bit more, what's the biggest risk you took personal branding wise? And did it backfire or did it pay off?
Oh, gosh. How long have we got? You remember, if you go back to take wise risks, I have been definitely, when I first decided that I was going to start wearing, I definitely was conscious, I need a prop, right? I'm wearing glasses is no longer a prop, right? I mean, wearing glasses on the football field, back then, that was absolutely a prop, right? I just had to see. So, but it soon became obvious to me that having something that physically separates you a little bit somehow or other and makes people think, whoa, what's this person about? So I was probably, I don't know, I was already a national sales manager working for my mentor, Lionel. So I was 29-ish. And I decided then I'm going to start wearing some Larry ties and I'm going to start wearing some Larry vests on it, because everything was suits in those days, right? I mean, Lionel found it amusing. And I'm sure some people thought, what is he smoking? What is he on? And obviously that at the start of it, that's a big risk, because I was walking into, as the national sales manager of a company that was doing very well in Australia, meeting the CIOs of large banks, of government organisations. Now, it was a high risk. In fact, a couple of the sales guys said, "Gary, do you really have to wear that tie to this meeting? We're meeting with the CIO of the Treasury Department. I mean, he's been there for 700 years." So that was a high risk. I would rate that very highly. I would then rate very highly, and it's worked out, because it became a fun thing, right? And I was able to wear more outrageous vests, because it got around that's that wacko. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what he wears next time, right? And hence I have many of these kinds of outfits, right? So the risk that didn't work was when I was at Microsoft and I decided to take a 3-year sponsorship of golf. That did not work out very well for me at all. That was my decision. It was to be the major sponsor of the Australian Masters tournament. So it became the Microsoft Masters. So we got naming rights. I regarded it then and regard it now as a very smart decision, because Microsoft was trying to go from being this fun little desktop company to an enterprise company. Well, how do you get noticed in the enterprises, right? You go do something major. Sports sponsorship would have been around for years, but not in IT companies. That was a very conscious decision on my part. The Masters was a very, very, Greg Norman was #1 golfer in the world at the time. There was a lot of attention to it. And I personally signed a 3-year sponsorship deal, which was, quite a lot of money to be the naming rights sponsor. That did not work out well for me personally at all. Microsoft took extreme exception to that, to say the least, and that's one of the times where I got thrown off the hill. So risks are, you have to think of. I'm a risk taker. And I think if you want to be, you've got to be prepared to take some risks in life if you want to be noticed and if you want to build a strong career. It's not mandatory, but I'm pretty happy with most of the choices I made. Some, if I had my time over again, I'd probably not do. But hey, that's part of learning.
Good to know that even the best make mistakes as well.
Yep.
Moving on from there, I guess talking a little bit more about personal branding. We've got a question: how should I begin getting exposure and building my personal brand?
Well, look, I can't give you it's different for everybody, right? If you're genuinely interested in building a personal brand, I think most people should be, because it's attendant to building a career. That's how I didn't do it just because I wanted to be well known. I did it because this seems like a logical assistance to me having a good career and being noticed. And I want jobs I'll be interested in, right? It has a massive impact on your personality. Are you an outgoing person, or are you a conservative person? If you want to build a brand, I would strongly recommend that you figure out some kind of prop. There's a risk, right? Whether it's whether it's growing the moustache like Himanshu has and his curls around nicely, that's a physical prop. I've never been interested in growing a moustache anyway. So whether it's clothing, whether it's something physically you carry with you, like Charlie Chaplin had a cane, something that you always carry with you that gets connected to you. I can't think of something physical. In the early days of my career, the physical thing, apart from my dress, was the stupid Motorola mobile phones that were, half the size of the room. Not many people had those in the early days. And you'd walk in with that thing and they go, what the hell is that, right? With a massive antenna on top of it. That actually became a semi-little prop for a while until everybody has a mobile phone. Your mobile phone is hardly a prop. Everyone's got one. I would think about something that is going to physically differentiate me a little bit, and have some reasons why, right? And the more important thing about getting noticed and building a brand is how high you set your personal bar in everything you say and do. You need to be incredibly consistent. People notice people who work hard, work smart, and do it every day. They don't do it every other day. Because, you know, people are looking for the things you do wrong, not the things you do right. That's unfortunately life, right? And leadership, I have a big issue with what I call negative leadership. There's a hell of a lot of it in this world where they're going, yes, but I remember last week he or she did this, right? So you've got to remember that the low part of your performance is something that sticks with people, rightly or wrongly, way more than the high. So you need to minimize the gap as much as you can. Every day matters to me in how I represent myself, every day. I mean that sincerely. So that's the only suggestion I can make. Look for something that's physically a bit different if you're really interested in a personal brand, but above everything else, get noticed by the consistency with which you perform at your best. And not many people do that. Very few people have enough determination personally to be the best version of themselves virtually every day. Very few.
Very solid advice. Moving forward, just to talk about media and social media a little bit more, because we did touch on it earlier. What social medias are you using right now, and what do you recommend?
Hey guys, folks, I am your worst advisor when it comes to social media, right? If I had my way, there wouldn't be any, right? I mean, because it dilutes everything, right? Social media is a wonderful asset, but it's a dilution of you as an individual. I mean, that's what social media, you know, it's a great information deliverer. It's a great thing in terms of knowing what's going on in the world far more easily. The internet is just a fabulous way of finding out. You know, when I would go into, in the earlier days, go in to meet a CIO, how did I know anything about that CIO if I had not met them before? About the only options would be to ring a few people, say, do you know this guy or gal, right? I would get last year's annual report, which was a physical book, right? Go through that. It may or may not ever even mention the CIO. So your ability to know what's going on these days, I can find out about any CIO really without ever having met them, because you know, I've got social media, in particular I've got LinkedIn, and you know, to me, I find it frustrating when a salesperson or a technical person, and I say, so how long has the CISO or the CIO been at the company? Oh, I'm not sure. What do you mean you're not sure? It's like, so to me, social media is a great information deliverer. I'm not on Facebook, as I said. I am on Twitter. I do see Twitter as a reasonable transfer of info. I didn't even know about Reddit, so I'm going to go and look up Reddit. I'm not on any of the other social medias. I don't recommend that to you guys. I think you probably need to be on most of them. How you use that, the question is, how does that differentiate you? I don't think it does in particular. I think it makes you more aware of what's going on to enable your holding your bar high. I'm not a great advisor on social media, folks, because I'm only on Twitter. I'm in the, you know, I'm in a better situation where my brand is built, where I'm in a senior role that I really love, where you know, people are aware of what my brand is, if you will. So I'm on the other end of that spectrum. I don't need social media. My question to you is, how can you use social media to differentiate yourself? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how you easily do that. You've just got to be careful about, you've actually got to be careful about not, saying anything on social media that potentially puts you in a box that you never wanted to be put in, but that's where people put you based on 2 lines you put in a Twitter or in a Facebook. And it's amazing how people draw conclusions about other people without ever having met them. That's your biggest problem with social media. People could only draw conclusions about me when I was building my career by physically meeting me or by hearing about others. They couldn't find, there was no social media, so there was no history that they could, yes, I remember Gary, he said that 15 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years. I feel sorry for politicians and people like that where a thing they've said 10 years ago gets dragged up, right, and becomes the thing that people work on. It's very, very tough, social media. You have to be really careful what you put on it.
Got time just for one last question after those wise words on social media. Has being different or has sort of standing out in a job interview been successful for you and been a successful strategy in finding new positions?
Unequivocally, yes. I can say, I mean, I've been in the IT industry only, obviously. When I left university, I was originally an electronics design person. I wasn't in sales or sales management. I was an engineer. I did engineering jobs for about 2.5 years. I was an okay engineer and a much better salesperson. So I moved into, I mean, communicating with people, I think is something I do okay. It absolutely, being different has absolutely gotten me noticed. It got me interviewed by journalists way more. Obviously, if you get a job as the Microsoft Managing Director of Australia, if you get a job as the Cisco Managing Director of Australia and then the Vice President of Asia, if you get the same job with EMC, you are going to get interviewed because of your position. But I've earned the right to get to those positions, and I've earned the right partly because of what I say and do, and partly because I did get noticed. My job, so to go back, I would say in my 40+ years, I've actually chosen to apply for a job without being approached for a job maybe 2 times. The Managing Director of Australia for Microsoft and the VP of Asia job for Oracle, I was approached. And why was I approached? Because they knew of me, they knew of my reputation. They didn't worry about the fact I wore a crazy vest. They just knew that based on what they'd seen on interviews, etc., that this guy has some kind of a brain, so he's worth talking to. I got offered the job at Cisco. I was approached for that. I was approached for the job at Aruba. I was approached for the job at Force 10 Networks. I was approached for the job at where I currently am, Tenable. And by the way, in at least 3 of those situations, it was my previous boss from the previous company who'd moved to another company who came back and said, hey, Gary, I'd like you to come back, work for me again. We obviously had a good mutual respect and run Asia for this company. That's how it happened at Tenable. That's how it happened at Aruba. That's how it happened at Cisco. So absolutely, it's made a massive difference to me because in general, I've been approached for roles as opposed to applying for roles. And that is all about reputation.
Wonderful. Sounds like you've developed quite a reputation for yourself, and your personal brand still stands tall to this day. Thank you very much, Gary, for talking about career development and personal branding with us.
No problem. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all as well for attending Gary Jackson's personal branding seminar. We look forward to seeing you at other ACS Foundation events. If you want to find out more about the Foundation and what it can offer you, visit the Foundation's website at www.acsfoundation.com.au. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you soon.